A kid with no friends, a head full of code, and a habit of zoning out so hard teachers thought something was wrong. How did that outcast end up steering rockets, rewiring cars, and grabbing a megaphone big enough to shake politics and media at the same time? The journey from a bullied 12-year-old selling a homemade game to a man accused of holding too much power isn't just a rise. It's a string of gambles that either reinvented entire industries or pushed them to a breaking point, depending on who's telling the story. Because while the headlines praise reusable rockets and global satellites, the whispers are louder. Brutal work culture, sudden mass layoffs, and political donations on a scale that turns boardrooms into war rooms. So the real question isn't whether he changed the game. It's whether the game can survive the way he plays it. But that wasn't the whole story. The first twist started long before the rockets, back when the quiet kid realized nobody was coming to save him. So he'd have to build his own way out. He didn't just read. He inhaled information, burning through manuals and sci-fi until those trance-like zone-outs looked less like a defect and more like an overclocked processor mapping ideas in real time. At school, that same intensity made him a target. Biographies recount how beatings sent him to hospital and eventually out of his public school, a permanent reminder that brilliance rarely wins popularity contests. When other kids were swapping cartridges, he was shipping code. At 12, he wrote a space shooter called Blaster and sold the listing for $500, his first real taste of building something people would pay for. That early win wasn't just pocket money. It proved a loop that would define his life: absorb, build, iterate, and push forward, no matter who laughed or shoved. And yet, that wasn't the whole story. The quiet kid who monetized the game at 12 would soon try to monetize entire cities, start with a map of every business he could put on the internet. The family split fractured early. Born in Pretoria, he grew up amid a messy divorce and a complicated relationship with his father before locking on to a single objective: get to North America, where the future he imagined actually had a runway. At 17, he made the jump to Canada through his mother's citizenship, bouncing between odd jobs, including a brutally dangerous boiler room cleanout at a lumber mill, just to keep moving until school opened doors. Queen's University came first, then a transfer to the University of Pennsylvania, where physics and economics became the dual lenses he'd use to scan opportunities and pounce when the web era cracked open. Those years weren't glamorous. They were scrappy. Calling stranger for meetings, hustling rent, and stockpiling the belief that the internet could reorganize entire cities if someone mapped them right. But that wasn't the whole story. The map he wanted to redraw wouldn't be a sketch on paper. It would be code, categories, and a bet that local business data plus directions could live online before anyone thought to search for it. The bet was simple: put the yellow pages and a map in the same browser window, then sell placements to every business that wanted clicks before clicks even meant anything. Zip2 turned that scrappy idea into real money, enough for Compaq to buy it out and hand him roughly $22 million at 27. Instead of coasting, he pushed the chips back in with X.com, a radical plan to move banking completely online, only to find himself in a knife fight with Confinity's PayPal team over branding, direction, and speed. The merger kept his vision alive, but cost him the steering wheel. During a trip with his new wife, the board replaced it with Peter Thiel as CEO, convinced that X.com sounded like the wrong kind of website, and that PayPal's name carried trust he wouldn't concede. He stayed the largest shareholder, but the reputation started forming: relentless, demanding, and willing to override anyone if it meant shipping faster, a style that fans called exacting and critics labeled micromanagement with collateral damage. But that wasn't the whole story. Losing PayPal didn't slow him down. It set up the most brutal year of his life, when rockets blew up, cars ran out of cash, and one all-or-nothing launch would make or break everything he'd built. 3 rockets, 3 failures. 2006 burned out 25 seconds after liftoff. 2007 stumbled after stage separation, and August 2008 ended in an explosion that left the control room silent and the bank account nearly empty. SpaceX had money for one last shot, and at the same time Tesla was bleeding cash on the Roadster, with costs overshooting plans and investors losing patience by the hour. Layered over the business chaos was a private heartbreak. Years earlier, he and his first wife had lost their infant son, a trauma that biographies say marked him deeply even as he buried himself in work. Logic said to cut losses and save one company. Instead, he sold assets, split his remaining funds between both, and chose the riskiest path: push both rockets and cars to the edge and see what survived. But that wasn't the whole story. The fourth launch would decide everything, and a last-hour lifeline on Christmas Eve would drag one dream back from the brink. September 28, 2008. On its fourth try, Falcon 1 finally reached orbit, making SpaceX the first private company to put fully liquid-fueled rocket there, a single green checkmark that flipped out into demand. Within weeks, NASA locked in a commercial resupply services contract worth about $1.6 billion, transforming a near-dead startup into a government partner with missions on the calendar and cash in the bank. On the ground, the other crisis got its miracle. A last-hour $40 million infusion on Christmas Eve 2008 kept Tesla breathing long enough to ship Roadsters and prove there was real demand behind the noise. He'd split his remaining funds, sold personal luxuries, and bet that momentum would do what optimism couldn't. Now, for the first time in a year, both rockets and cars were moving forward together. But that wasn't the whole story. The next chapter wouldn't be survival. It would be escalation. Sedans that felt like smartphones, rockets that landed themselves, and a satellite web that wrapped the planet. Model S didn't just look fast. It reset expectations. Early coverage emphasized a luxury sedan that could sprint 0 to 60 miles per hour in about 4.2 seconds, go long on a single charge, and win Motor Trend's Car of the Year, while treating software like a living part of the car. That computer-on-wheels approach became the template for everything after. Over-the-air updates, touch-first interfaces, and a rhythm of upgrades that made cars feel like consumer tech rather than static machines. In orbit, SpaceX landed a Falcon 9 booster in 2015, a moment space historians called a breakthrough toward true reusability and lower launch costs. Proof that rockets could fly back, stand tall, and fly again. Then came scale. A rocket family that launched relentlessly, a satellite constellation called Starlink that wrapped much of the planet in broadband, and a pipeline aiming at even bigger hardware with Starship. But that wasn't the whole story. As reach widened from your driveway to low Earth orbit, debates got louder about concentration of power, gatekeeping the sky, and what happens when one founder sets the pace for multiple industries at once. The leadership style that shipped rockets and cars also cut deep. After buying Twitter and rebranding as X, he slashed roughly 80% of staff, arguing the company had weeks of cash left and needed drastic measures, a move praised by some for efficiency and blasted by others as reckless. Reports since have framed it as a template for austerity. Waves of additional cuts, intense hours, and a hard pivot in moderation policies that turned the platform into a lightning rod for culture wars. His posts have repeatedly collided with markets and regulators, most famously the funding-secured saga that led to SEC penalties, board changes, and years of legal fallout before a jury cleared him of investor liability. A reminder that a single message can move billions. Then came politics at scale. Filings show he poured nearly $300 million into the 2024 cycle backing Trump and Republicans, fueling allies and drawing critics who say this concentrates money and influence in one pair of hands. But that wasn't the whole story. Even with the backlash, the expansion didn't slow. Next came brains, tunnels, and a platform he said would become the everything app, raising new question. Visionaries safeguard free speech or a mogul stacking levers of power. The bullied coder who sold a $500 game now sits atop industries that don't usually share the same sentence. Cars, rockets, satellites, social platforms, and AI. An orbit so wide it forces the world to decide whether this is concentrated genius or concentrated risk. The record books say wealth beyond $400 billion and platforms that can sway markets and narratives. The headlines say an everything app, an AI lab sprinting on open source promises, and a founder who still treats timelines like dares. Love him or hate him, the one thing no one gets to do is ignore him. And the open question he leaves hanging is simple. If one person can move this many levers, who moves him?